Okay, this is like part 6 from this book, Prevent and Reverse Parkinson's Disease, Chronic Fatigue Syndrome by me, Pete Rogers. So we're on page 174. Stress and the brain. What builds resilience? You know, the things that make you resilient is having a strong sense of purpose. This is what I'm going to try to achieve, and therefore I will keep pushing until I'm successful. You know, that makes you stronger. Being religious. Having a healthy diet, getting your sleep, avoiding stimulants like caffeine, okay? Having a stoic mindset, you know? I know I'm half screwed, but I'm not fully screwed. I'm grateful for that, and I'll continue to try to do my best. Social support, love of your parents, financial support, all those types of things. University support if you're in school, that sort of thing. High self-esteem. But high self-esteem comes from knowing that you're doing the best you can with what you got where you're at. What is stress? A physiological response designed to respond to danger. It can be real or anticipated. Is it ever good? Yeah, you need some stress, a little bit to just energize you, but you don't want so much that it overwhelms you, distress. There's a Yerkes-Dodson curve, and basically it says, you know, you want to be in the zone, in the middle for trying to achieve something. Pumped up enough to have your good energy and focus, but not overdone so you're anxious, not underdone so you're lazy and bored. Okay, why does stress kill people in the real world? Because it increases clotting factors. The way you can remember everything is being chased by a tiger in the dark. And if the tiger were to scratch you, you don't want to bleed to death. So our body is made to be a little bit prothrombotic when running from a tiger. Okay, increases factor VIII clotting factor, fibrinogen clotting factor, von Willebrand clotting factor, increased platelet action. So the platelets are more prone to clot. Also, chronic stress will lead to vasoconstriction of the gut called the splanchnic circulation, and that lack of blood supply will also lead to leaky gut. And then you get LTA and LPS into the blood, the bacterial endotoxins, which will then cause amyloid clotting, make your blood more prothrombotic. Stress will also elevate blood lipids, so you'll get a little bit of blood sludge and rouleau formation from that. So that also is prothrombotic. So you can see these little things are adding up. So don't stress your old man out. Okay, stress increases the risk of infection and cancer because it suppresses the immune system. Increase the risk of cancer mets because the platelet activation can hide the metastasizing cell when it's in the blood. Chronic severe stress can increase the risk of cognitive decline. Okay, what causes stress? We all know that. Lots of things stress us out. Physical problems, financial problems, social problems, okay, trauma, lack of sleep. What hormones are increased? You get elevated cortisol. That drives your blood sugar up. That also activates your brain. In small amounts, it's a good thing, but in big amounts, it's bad. Adrenaline and noradrenaline. Okay, also called epinephrine and norepinephrine. Those are catecholamines. Okay. What are stress equivalents? You know, lack of sleep is perceived the same way, and so is caffeine. So that's why for anybody to say, oh, stress is bad, and then say, I like drinking coffee, then you're stupid, because you're doing pretty much the same thing. Caffeine will increase your heart rate, increases your blood pressure, increases your blood lipids. It makes you more anxious, more irritable, decreases sleep, increased insomnia, increased rebound hypoglycemia, increased loss of magnesium in your urine. Okay, it's not good for you. It's a vasoconstrictor, drops blood supply to your brain, you know, in the ballpark of 20%. Not good. You can handle that fine when you're 20, 30 years old. You get to be 60, 70, you might not handle it so well. All these, you know, people, even these phony health experts, phony sleep experts, they'll tell you, oh, coffee is good for you. That's because they have to say that. You know, the public, you should get it through your head that if you want to get interviewed on a popular channel, you have to kiss their ass and promote the things that they want to promote, what their advertisers are selling, what their commercial promoters are selling, and there's big money in all that stuff. There's no money in telling the truth. There's no money in helping the pros. Okay, remember McLean's three-part brain. You know, your fist here, this is your spinal cord, this is your brain stem. On top of that's the limbic system, and on top of that's the cerebral cortex. That's a three-part brain of McLean, the triune brain. The point of it is that brain stem is like a reptile, it just lays an egg, walks away, doesn't have much responsibility or emotions. The limbic system, shaped like the letter C of Chicago Bears football helmet, it's the midline center of the brain. That is sort of the mammalian brain, the emotional brain. Then on top of that's the cerebral cortex, the thoughtful brain. The point of it all is that you want to be in cerebral cortical mode most of the time. Okay, you can think more rationally. You can make long-term decisions. You can control your impulses better. But when you're in impulse mode, you're like your dog. Okay, Mammal brain is impulsive and emotional, and you will sometimes say or do stupid things that you'd have wished you didn't do. Okay, here's a diagram of it. So there's reptile brain, is your brain stem, okay? And then here's limbic brain. Limbic means edge, like medial edge. And the cingulate gyrus is in continuity down through the isthmus into the medial temporal lobe. There's the corpus callosum right in here, okay? And then on top of that's the cerebral cortex, your thinking brain. And our cerebral cortex is like triple the size of a chimp. Chimps are stupid. Okay, we're not that closely related to them. Cerebellum is where the majority of your neurons are. About 70% of your neurons in there for fine motor control. You have all these short-length neurons. You know, these up here you got a lot more longer neurons, like your projecting corticospinal tract and all that kind of stuff. Okay, let's see what else is a little bit interesting here. Caffeine will decrease your emotional resilience, potentially get you to do stupid stuff you'll regret later. Let's see, what else is interesting about stress? Being chased by a tiger in the dark. All that matters is surviving the next 15 minutes, so that's the purpose of it. So cortisol suppresses your immune system, mobilizes the glucose and lipid into your blood because you need that for running quickly. Here's some of the other things cortisol does. It has lots of effects, but the bottom line we care about is it stimulates the brain by causing increased glutamate release, the excitatory neurotransmitter. So that's not good for your brain. Okay, in small amounts it's relevant, but in big amounts, not good. And it increases your blood lipids, so it increases your atherosclerosis risk. It breaks down your bones, can cause osteoporosis if you're chronic, highly stressed. But the big thing is it suppresses your immune system, putting you at increased risk for cancer, increased risk for persistence of an infection. And driving up your blood glucose also makes it increase your risk of diabetes. So you don't want to be have chronic elevated cortisol. Cortisol is reciprocal with melatonin. They're sort of the opposite of each other. Cortisol goes up in the daytime to give you more blood glucose for energy. Melatonin goes up at night to help you sleep. Actually, the melatonin in the daytime is made inside your cells, but at night it's made in the pineal gland. Sunlight helps to increase the melatonin made in the cells. It also has antioxidant properties. But this is how it normally should be. You want to avoid blue light at night because it drops melatonin production. You want cortisol levels low at night so you can sleep better. You know, they're like a seesaw. A lot of physiological relationships are like a seesaw. Cortisol is the opposite of oxytocin and melatonin. So cortisol is the stress hormone, and it's the full awake hormone, the alert hormone. Oxytocin is the love, everything is cool, everything is fine. Stress is, no, there's a potential problem here. We need to be hypervigilant, okay? So cortisol daytime, oxytocin, melatonin more for nighttime, help you sleep. And oxytocin sort of the love and bonding hormone, okay? Cortisol goes with SAN, sympathetic autonomic nervous system. Okay, it has part mineralocorticoid properties, meaning that it causes retention of sodium from the kidney, which helps to raise your blood pressure when you're running from a tiger, okay? So you need that. You want higher blood pressure, okay? You want to maintain increased intravascular volume to pump more blood all over the place and keep your systemic arterial circuit full of blood. Otherwise, you wouldn't have enough blood. You sort of bottom out with all your muscles being active and vasodilated. Okay, there's other things that are sort of the opposite. You know, your vasodilators. When you're stressed out, you're going to vasoconstrict just about everything except your muscle tissue. Okay. So being stressed out is SANS, sympathetic autonomic nervous system. You know, fight or flight, the accelerator. PANS is parasympathetic autonomic nervous system. Feed and breed, rest and digest. It's the brake. And so where you want to be for doing thoughtful creative work is more in PANS, but with a little bit of SANS on board. So when you're asleep, that's more PANS. When you're awake, that's more SANS. Anytime you're moving, that's going to be more of a SANS type thing. There's a lot of things that are all these seesaw relationships, like antioxidants prevent disease. Oxidants tend to cause disease, stealing electrons, okay? Here's just a diagram, simple diagram of a neuron. Basically, you know, the action potential. Here's the sensory part of the neuron, incoming information through the dendrites, cell body with the nucleus up there. Here's the axon. So if something happens up here, it has incoming inputs that tell it should fire an action potential. The action potential will typically begin around here at what's called the axon hillock. It'll be transported down the axon, reaches the axon terminal. That opens up the depolarization wave opens up the voltage-gated calcium channel. Calcium comes into the cytoplasm of the axon terminal, and it causes the neurotransmitter vesicles, NT for neurotransmitter, to travel to the plasma membrane of the synaptic cleft, release their neurotransmitter, diffuses across the cleft, interacts with the postsynaptic neuron, and exerts an effect upon it. Okay, glutamate's excitatory. That'll have an excitatory effect. And here is showing glutamate being released from this neurotransmitter vesicle, diffuses across the cleft, interacts with the postsynaptic neuron. Cortisol will increase glutamate release. So will stress and caffeine, sleep deprivation. They're all the same thing pretty much. Okay, EMF, like from holding your cell phone up to your head, you're going to open up the VGCCs, voltage-gated calcium channels. That'll let more calcium in there. So again, it's increasing cytoplasm calcium that activates the cell. And that will then cause increased activation of the postsynaptic neuron. Okay, you need to know that. Glutamate is excitatory. It's 90% of the neurotransmitters in your cerebral cortex, and it causes increased calcium inflow into the postsynaptic neuron. That's what you need to know. All right, let's see. Some of this stuff, I'm not going to go through all the text. I think that would be too boring. I mostly go through the pictures when I give these videos about my books, because I'll go into a lot more detail in the text, but some of that I think is boring for the audience. What's the effect of stress on the gut? It's a vasoconstrictor, so it shuts down blood flow to the gut, and so when stress is chronic, it can cause leaky gut. What's the effect on the bone? Acutely, not much. Chronically, though, it can have an osteoporosis type effect. What happens to the immune system? In the acute phase, it's shut down. Chronically, it tends to be shut down, but paradoxically, you can get a flip in the cortisol response, and it can even become pro-inflammatory when it's very chronic. What about stress and cancer risk? Increased risk of cancer because your immune system's suppressed. Okay, you're also not going to sleep so well. That's all bad. How does the immune system recognize abnormal cells? Through pattern recognition receptors, PRRs. And they'll bind to MAMPs, PAMPs, DAMPs, and CAMPs. MAMPs are microbial-associated molecular patterns. PAMPs are pathogen-associated molecular patterns. DAMP is for damaged tissue, damage-associated molecular patterns. CAMPs is for cancer-associated molecular patterns. Okay, so the immune system recognizes those things and knows how to deal with them, and knows what they mean. Caffeine also decreases DNA repairability. Cortisol contributes to shortening of telomeres, shortening your life. You lose magnesium in the urine from excessive stress. That's all bad. We know magnesium's the silent hero, holds ATP together, the second and third phosphates. Magnesium comes from the central chlorophyll, comes from plant foods. It's the intracellular ions are potassium and magnesium. So you eat the whole plant foods, you get intact cells, you'll get your potassium and magnesium. Wound healing also slows down because of the cortisol, the immune suppression. Chronic psychological stress leads to insomnia, and that'll lead to junk food, binge eating, and weight gain. It can. Chronic stress, elevated cortisol will increase your risk of diabetes, keeps your blood glucose elevated, keeps your blood lipids elevated. Severe chronic stress can then, over time, have an excitotoxic effect and cause cognitive decline. That's like severe stress for years and years. Okay. Yeah, you also want to minimize stress in the post-stroke or post-surgical patient because it gets the wrong things happening. Hippocampal atrophy makes you stupid. Chronic psychological stress, post-traumatic stress disorder can shrink your hippocampus, make you dumber, decrease your memory ability. Let's see. Liver cells can regenerate much better than brain cells. So I know I got a long chapter here. This is all about MSG and MFG. MSG is monosodium glutamate. MFG is just manufactured free glutamate, meaning all that matters is glutamate, the amino acid with the G on it. So what you do is you just take something like gluten or casein or soy or whey, and you chop it up through chemical processing in a factory, and then you free up the individual glutamates, and that's what manufactures free glutamate. All that matters is the glutamate from its excitatory effect. So your body doesn't care if it's MSG or MFG. Both of them are going to get more glutamate into your body, potentially have an excitatory effect on your brain. And you can even get vicious cycles whereby MSG and MSG will increase cortisol. That'll cause more brain glutamate release. Okay? So this can lead to insomnia, can lead to all kinds of problems. Okay, what lowers stress? You know, having a nice dog, having a nice family, provide you social support. I showed you the seesaw between sands and pans, you know, the brake and the accelerator there. Basically, your body adapts to whatever phase it's in. When it's stressed out, it's in sand, sympathetic mode for fight or flight. When it's relaxed, it'll either be sleeping or it'll be postprandial or it'll be in the fasting, but it'll be more relaxed. There's a lot of stuff to say about stress, but I think I hit the key points. You know, if you really want to learn all this stuff, it's here. The bottom line is you want to spend as much of your life as you can in low sands, low stress, and mostly in pans, a more thoughtful mode for doing creative work, for example. But, you know, a lot of times at your job, you got to go really fast. We're smartest in the morning when we first wake up. Anytime you move, that's always sand. So like when you wake up at night to void, do what you got to do to void, but don't move around too much. You'll start waking yourself up. It'll be harder to go back to sleep. The way you optimize cognitive performance is you minimize noise, so you avoid distractions. So get everything else out of the room except what you're doing to the extent that's possible, and you'll focus better on your work. I usually wear ear protectors when I study because I don't want to hear the noise. And just make everything else easy. Have good lighting, no distractions. Okay, what promotes neurogenesis? Exercise, reading, intelligent conversation, sleep. Neurogenesis is the formation of new neurons that can help make you smarter, but it only happens at a pretty gradual rate, but at least it does happen. Okay. Yeah, so this chapter is pretty detailed, but I think for the purpose of this video, we don't need to go into all this. The guy who figured out excitotoxicity in the beginning was Dr. Craig Olney in the 1960s doing experiments with MSG. They used to put that in baby formula. An excitotoxin in baby formula. That's ridiculous. Ooh. Also, why do I write so much about this? Because this is fundamental. I mean, you got to know about these things if you want to be serious about physiology, especially all that stuff with the membrane ion pumps and the calcium. You have to know that to make sense out of the brain. And most people don't. And that's why I got the best theory in neurodegeneration. So anyways, that's all we're going to cover for stress. I've given other videos on stress where I go in a little more detail, but I think for the purpose of this book, that's all you need to get right now. If you're more serious, you could read it. But I realize the only people who are going to read this book are people who really want to learn. There's not many people like that, but it's a pretty serious book. Anyways, hope you found that helpful.